and welcome back to another episode of Talk 21. It's your host, Sam Genova, and of course, my co host.
Welcome back. Thanks for watching us again. Or no?
Well,
Not?
So
No?
today, boys, we're going to talk about cohabitat, co-living in a market where you simply cannot get a mortgage by yourself.
So you want me to start?
Sure.
Well, it's a good topic. I mean, we've seen the influx of rentals going through the roof because affordability is a bit down. And then I'm seeing the swing where people are buying bigger homes and they're cohabitating. Like people are like two families coming together, or like people just
Basement
in basement,
income.
like secondary incomes. These laneway houses that they're talking about too. There's a whole bunch of different things going on, and it's become more common. And it used to be more of a thing where immigrants coming into the country that needed to do this, but I think it's just people are just doing it. I mean, it's becoming something that's a viable way of living. Like people are not able to afford a big detached home. They're coexisting. So
The other day, I heard a stat that people are also renting out like spaces, like rooms to
yeah.
individuals. So whether you have a couple extra rooms vacant in your house, bedrooms, they're renting out,
Yeah.
bedroom spaces.
Well, one of the big things that the hotel chains are doing, primarily, there's one in the United States called extended suites by Holiday Inn, where basically you can take one of their hotel rooms and stay for up to a year, and they give you like a really reduced rate. This is coinciding with the fact that no one can afford to stay at the hotel just on a weekend.
Yeah, night to
and
night.
no one can afford living. So now hotels are starting to open up. How do you guys feel about that concept?
I mean, look, I think with today's market and conditions, I think people need help.
Yeah.
So, however we can accommodate and help these people, I'm all for it. I mean, if this is obviously I believe it's going to be a temporary thing unless it becomes a full time. I have no idea. They start converting hotels into residential suites. I mean, I don't know, but like I said, I think anything we can do to help people in this tough economy. I
Right.
mean, I'm all for it.
Yeah, about being creative, about being able to sustain the lifestyle. Everything's getting too expensive. So, if you can't afford a home, I think people are welcoming like residents, people to come in and rent. So
Strangers into their own house. So I mean, however we can get creative. I mean, I think it's I'm all for it.
So we do not condone illegal transactions, especially with people who renovate their basements for, what do they call it, a multiplex home where two families can live in there? Top
yeah,
bottom, right? As long as
duplexes.
you have an entrance. Some of it is not done by code or by
Right,
permit or even by legal permits.
right.
What kind of a risk are people taking now staying somewhere where it technically hasn't been legally approved?
Well, most apartments, especially basement apartments, have not been ever really legalized. Like I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm assuming maybe more than 50% are not even legal, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, there's always a bit of a risk because there's not always a proper egress to get out of the apartment should there be a catastrophic fire or something like that. So everybody's got to be mindful of that, especially if you're representing a buyer, an investor who was looking for a multi-residential dwelling. Got to be mindful that some of these are not legal, so we can't represent them in any other way other than telling them that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't mean you can't legalize them and retrofit them to become legal, but yeah, you have to be very mindful as a realtor trying to represent somebody who's looking for a multi.
Yeah, and it is our job to disclose that whenever we have a listing. So as a
Yeah.
buyer, when we're going in there, we need to know that. And there's nothing wrong with having a not legal basement
Yeah.
or part like there's nothing wrong with it as long as the living space is because it's proper for people to live and they can use because
And you got to make sure they're aware that it's not legal.
Yes.
You could definitely legalize it. It might, you might have to have proper fire separation, obviously a proper egress from a bedroom to be able to climb out of the dwelling. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that somebody's not going to rent it. Like people
No,
are
of
still
course.
renting properties like that.
So now we're going to delve into slumlords. Basically, the issue that's happening now in this current market is that people cannot afford to buy, so they need to rent. And these landlords know that. and they're not upkeeping with their maintenance, and people are living in very tough conditions. So, what do we do to combat this rise in slumlord behavior?
That's a fantastic question because the funny thing is, I had this conversation with someone yesterday. So what's happening? I'm not, Dave. I'm sure you're aware of it. There's a lot of immigrants coming to the country that are illegal, and people who own properties as investments are because these people have nowhere to stay and can't
Right.
really afford, and they're trying to figure things out. They're jamming a whole bunch of people living in under one dwelling
Like,
illegally. So they these poor peoples don't have the rights to speak up, but they're living in these tough conditions, and it's happening a lot more than like I know of a house that it's happening to right now, and it's just like it's got to be 20 people living in there.
wow. I mean, I haven't crossed that. I haven't crossed my path. It hasn't crossed my path,
Oh yeah.
but I don't doubt it. Like, I mean, there's desperate times, desperate measures. But at the end of the day, we have a tribunal that governs all these things, and if everybody's mindful, for the most part, tenants have most of the rights anyway. So,
But the problem is, Dave, these people are here illegally.
yeah,
So
that's different.
they've got no.
Yeah, but I mean, that's definitely something that's going on. But for the bigger picture, they're not all illegal,
No,
and
no.
so the places that are not that great of accommodations, there are ways that the tenants could resolve their matters by going to the tribunal. Tenants in Ontario and Canada like have way more rights than landlords do, and they're usually the more fortunate in these scenarios. But if it's a really horrible dwelling with like major hazards, obviously that's
Nobody
not right
deserves to
either.
live in
That's
that,
not
yeah.
right either.
And on that topic of illegal immigrants, the number one problem, number one in Toronto, in the downtown core, is the fact that a lot of these illegal immigrants are coming here, obviously, unregistered, and the landlords know this, so they're sometimes charging them 3-4x more than what the what the rate is. Should there be legislation or some sort of a regulation in regards to controlling these landlords that take advantage of people that have no voice?
Yeah, I mean the neighbors should talk. That's really the only. That's really the only way that it stops these landlords from doing it,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the legislation is very clear. Like, either for residential dwellings, we're not allowed to take security deposits. It's first and last month only. If somebody's voluntarily paying way more because they don't qualify as a regular tenant,
Right.
and they're saying, look, we have a lot of money, but we just don't have a job or references whatsoever, but we have a bank account with funds in it that we came to this country. That's fine, but landlords got to be understanding that if you're taking all these rents in as prepayments for in lieu of having credentials with regards to jobs and or references, you're still taking a chance, because at the end of the day, I mean, they could go back to their tribunal and say they were unjustly treated and possibly get those deposits back, or what we call security deposits that we're not supposed to be calling security deposits
So,
back.
so now the problem with that, and I'll challenge you on that, is that a lot of these people do not have the funds to legally fight this. Legally, they won't be able to sustain the lawyer fees, so this could never get its way to the courts.
I'm gonna have to disagree with that, because it's not a legal matter. This is a tribunal, so you can apply at the tribunal without proper representation. And if the case is valid and somebody gets some basic knowledge about what the laws are with regards to tenancies in place, it's just going to take a long time because everything's backlogged and all that. But it's usually something that I have to say, usually tenants are ahead of the game on this one. So if they're mindful and they got a bit of representation, they can get justice, basically, right? So.
And the last question to end off this episode is a simple one, yet a difficult one. Should we impose strict credit checks, especially from a landlord to a tenant, to make sure that they're not stepping into any issues where all of a sudden they can up and leave, or they damage the home, but their security deposit doesn't cover? Should there be a bit more strict credit checks?
Well, back to Dave's point is the tenants have a lot more rights in their favor than the landlord. So To the credit reports, it's a must, of course. You must check their credit. You must have proof of employment. You must follow up with their employers to see if it's true. You know,
People don't do
recent.
that though, right? Landlords
Well,
don't do that.
they should. If I'm representing you
Yeah.
as an agent putting a deal for you with regards to a lease, whether it's a basement apartment or a 5,000 square foot home, you need to make sure.
Yeah.
And like nowadays, the tools are all there. The
But-
best thing is just checking references, and then at the end of the day, you have an interview process too.
Yes.
If it's you either do a Zoom call, meeting like Google Teams, whatever they are. Like there's ways of getting in front of them, even if you're not physically in front of them. But
Yeah.
you need to interview. And you have to make sure because it can go bad anytime.
Absolutely. I think your point is that happens when a lot of people don't use a realtor, when they do it themselves and they're like,
There you
okay,
go.
you know what?
I was just going
Um,
to say that. Should you get a legal representation of a realtor in order to make sure that all the
Yeah.
T's are crossed and all the I's
I'm an investor, you know, I've done this multiple times. I can do myself. I rented out so many places. And then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely do like a prudent landlord could rent their space out on their own, but at the end of the day, if you're not sure, like lean to us because it's not the service that is our bread and butter. Obviously, it's actually more time consuming, but when we service our clients, we're selling properties and buying properties, and alongside with that, we'll help you lease them. Even though it's not our bread and butter, but we've been there. Like we're investors ourselves. We have units out there in the rent pool. So we're coming to you with experience as a realtor, experience as landlords ourselves. So in general, we're here for that. It'd be silly if you didn't.
Advise all future tenants.
Yes. Have a
What's
realtor take care of your leases whenever you need something because
Or should you
the little
have
bit that you spend
responsibility?
is worth. We have to do so much more work. Sometimes we say that even doing a lease it's more work than when you
selling
have
a
to,
house.
when you have to sell a house.
Absolutely.
So a lot of work involved. There's a lot of checks that you have to do and
Yeah.
make
When
sure these
you're-
people check out. But again, also the paperwork is not always the end all be all either because you have some newer people that are coming to the country that may not have the credit or jobs, but they have like a good savings account. They're trying to find jobs. So
You have to look at the
you
whole
have
picture.
to look at. You have to sit down. Definitely must 100%. All my leased properties, all my list. I sit down and interview the tenants. It's a must, 100%. If you're not doing that, you're missing out. You're making a huge mistake.
So now the next biggest must is, Dave, if they have more questions, where can they find us?
I hate this part. If you want more information about leases and how to put them together, you can find us at C21 Fine Living Realty or just pick up the phone and call me.
What's the number?
And my number too, 416. My cell number is 416-561-2660.
And you can find me at Sam Genova Real Estate or call me 416-985-2633. We're glad to help.